People Who Walk in Darkness by Stuart M. Kaminsky. Narrated by Daniel Oreskes.
Chapter 1. Luke O'Neill was lost. He wasn't particularly worried. His cell phone wouldn't work down in the labyrinth 900 feet below the frozen layer of Earth. But the homing device required of everyone entering the mine was glowing bright green. The pipe, the vein of rock that contained the diamonds, was a reasonably rich one. Nothing exceptional, but productive, small brown gems that would go mainly into industrial tools, and the vast stockpile of the Russian diamond monopoly Alarosa, which in turn sold its holdings to De Beers. 20% of all diamonds mined worldwide were from Russia, and all of the mines, Luke knew, were located in Siberia. If they dared, which they would not do because there would be no profit in it, Alarosa could challenge De Beers and flood the market with relatively inexpensive diamonds of all quality levels. It was a standing, unspoken, suicidal threat, a doomsday scenario for the diamond market. The price paid by the world of diamonds allowed Russia a preferred seat at the table. The value of diamonds, as Luke knew, was not dependent on their rarity, but on the ability of the diamond cartel to control their flow and price. Luke was well aware that diamonds are nothing but pieces of compressed carbon, found not only in Siberia, but in Botswana, Australia, South Africa, and, at a smaller level, all over the planet. But production was down in this mine, or at least that was what Luke had been told. His job was to find out if the mine was so tapped out that it did not pay to keep it operating. Luke was a geologist with a good underground sense of direction, but if that failed him, he could always follow the dull yellow lights that glowed indifferently every 50 yards or so on the jagged walls of the tunnel. He was contracted with and well paid by the Canadian company that owned a piece of this operation, and so screw him. He had a job to do, plain and simple. He would get it done and get out of here, email his report to London, let De Beers deal with it, and get the hell back to Toronto. Luke had missed his son's birthday only 2 months ago when he was in Australia. Colette had not bothered to reproach him. What was the point? Let the boy know what kind of father he had, she had said. Well, she was right. Luke scanned the walls for signs. He had been doing this for a decade. He didn't have to think about what he was looking for. It either felt right or it didn't. The sense of diamond was part of him. He was a human detector. Dobson had told Luke he had been selected because he had more experience in this sort of thing. What sort of thing? Going into underground diamond mines, finding out why production was down, and determining if the mines were finally tapped out. Dobson was in Botswana at a surface mine. Hundreds of thousands of tons of fickle rock did not threaten above Dobson's head. Dobson could get to Cape Town in less than 3 hours, from even the most distant company mine in southern Africa. There were places in Cape Town, good food, warm beds, and warmer women ranging from pale, ghostly white to dark, smooth ebony. And then Dobson would be stopping at diamond cutters in Tel Aviv where, in spite of the slight threat of suicide bombers, he would stay overnight in a luxury suite in the Dan Tel Aviv Hotel. Luke, on the other hand, would spend the night in a visitor's room in the 4-story concrete block that housed the mine's middle management workers here in Devochka. Luke knelt next to the wall to his right. He had insisted on coming this way, even climbing over the dust-covered yellow machinery and down the slight incline. There was a feel of something this way. His guide, an old night-duty mine watchman, Boris Antonovich, had told him that this shaft needed shearing up. Boris, tall, sullen, hulking, and bearded, would not have been Luke's choice as a guide, but Boris had one advantage. He could speak a little French. Luke had not even bothered to answer when Boris issued his warning about the shaft. The geologist had simply gone down the tunnel, examining the walls, taking samples, seeing nothing of great interest, going deeper and deeper, further and further. And then he had noticed that Boris was not behind him. Probably back there sulking because Luke had come this way, instead of to the tunnel to the right that Boris had suggested. "This is an old shaft," Boris had said. "It's not worked anymore." Luke had known this. "It is dangerous," Boris had said. Danger is relative, Luke answered. Physical danger is absolute. A Russian philosopher in Siberia, just what Luke needed. I'm going in, Luke had said. Boris had shrugged and shook his head. The large tunnel was arched, with a craggy roof and wall, and an even, flat floor. Rubber-reinforced trucks with beds that could hold 10,000 tons of ore had ample room to rumble into the darkness at the end of the yellow tunnel. Boris's arguments for not going into this particular shaft were very persuasive, but not in the way the Russian desired. The more Boris warned, the more determined Luke had been to go this way. In a battle of wills between a Russian and a Canadian, the man with the money and the gun in his pocket will always win. Luke had a gun in his pocket. Luke was no fool. He had started carrying the weapon at first because of the stories others had told him about being threatened, attacked. Rumor was that an Australian geologist who worked for the company had been beaten to death at a mine site in the outback. Luke had, on his third trip to a site, been attacked by a black mine worker in Namibia. The man was tall, lean, his open shirt revealing taut muscles, his face revealing rage, his mouth spewing, cracking with a babble of language Luke didn't understand. In the man's right hand had been a rock. He had run at Luke, who was aware of voices, dark faces behind the man with the rock. Luke had fired, once. The lean man fell to his knees, still looking at Luke, still babbling. The lean man didn't die. He had attacked Luke because he was the only white man present. He had attacked Luke because the man's wife had died, and the man didn't have enough money to bury her properly. He blamed the mine, the humming, dark, maddening tunnels. He blamed the managers, the vague sense of the white owners of the mine. The doctor who operated on the crazed man to remove the bullet told Luke that his patient's babbling had been a rant ending with, "It is alive. It breathes. It waits." So Luke carried a small but effective gun in the leather bag over his shoulder. He knelt. He looked. He focused his laser flashlight on the wall in front of him. Someone had covered a 4-foot section of the wall with dirt that almost matched the rest of the wall. Most people wouldn't have noticed. Luke rubbed at the dirt-covered wall, took out a chemical spray and washed his section. Even before the spray finished its work, Luke could see what had been hidden. A wooden panel about 3 feet square. The panel was covered with chips of rock and dirt to carefully simulate the surrounding wall. Luke removed the panel and placed it against the tunnel wall. Then he shined his light inside the cave that extended about 6 feet into the rock. Luke crawled into the cave, coughed, and examined the walls around him. He could see immediately. He needed no tests. An untrained eye would see nothing. Luke saw everything. He chipped away a small outcrop to his right just above his head. Bits of rock rained on his head and back. He examined the rocky ore in his hand and decided. It was, if he were not mistaken, a reasonably rich outcropping. Considering the size of the cave and the quality of what he had in his hand, Luke concluded that someone had removed millions of rubles worth of uncut, jewelry-quality diamonds from the... Someone was singing. Luke, still holding the rock sample, crawled back out of the small cave and took out his gun. He sat with his back against the tunnel wall and listened. It sounded like the voice of a child singing in Russian, in a beautiful, clear voice that echoed sweetly through the tunnel, a funereal cathedral echo. The voice was coming closer. Luke got to his feet, dropped the rock into his case, and ripped the filter mask from his face. The tunnel lights went out. Luke was not a whimpering baby. He had served in the army, saw combat in Bosnia, had his share and more of barroom fights. Someone was playing games in the darkness. Fine. He would play too. Luke turned on his flashlight and aimed it down the tunnel. The child's voice came closer, and Luke could see a flickering light heading toward him, casting shadows on the tunnel walls. He waited, cursed his heavy breathing. Definitely the voice of a child singing a Russian song.